All right, let's get the scoop from around the league about them Knicks in the Eastern Conference with NBA insider Brandon Scoop Robinson. My man, we had you here, about a month and a half ago? They're going to have to start cutting checks pretty soon, the amount we're using you now.
Of course. I would love it. Let me know. Call me. Have my people call your people.
I mean, I thought you were going to be like, no, since, we know each other and all, it would be free 99, but at the same time, man, I get it.
Both can be true.
Both can be true.
Possibly.
All right, let's get into it. You don't get the name Scoop for no reason. Give us the scoop on what's going down from around the league. I see you looking at your phone.
I do, because I think there's something in the world where we're going to talk about the Knicks. We talk about the Celtics. We talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. I still do think that the young movement in the NBA is something to pay attention to. So, of course, when you look at that, there's three teams to me that stand out significantly. Yep. Number one, you look at the Indiana Pacers. Okay. You look at the play-in tournament and the amount of agitation in a good way when you watch close agitation, where you had the Pacers playing against the Los Angeles Lakers, and then they make the trade for Pascal Siakam. From folks that I speak with within the Pacers organization, they're trying to use these last 30-plus games to really grind it out and focus on the prize. Many people talk about a sleeper team like the Cavaliers being in the conversation. There are people on the Pacers side that feel like they should be in that conversation. So the Pacers are one of those teams that I'm paying attention to quite a bit. Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton, Pascal Siakam, and others are part of that legislative branch, if you will, within the Pacers organization. But then you also look at the Orlando Magic. Spent some time out in Orlando a couple weeks ago with head coach Jamal Mosley, who just signed a new deal with that team. This is a group surrounded around Paolo Banchero as well as Markelle Fultz that are really dialed in. They have a schedule that is of benefit to them closing the NBA season, but really and truly it starts with, as I mentioned, Jamal Mosley, who's really dialed in. I spent some time with him over the summer in Vegas during Summer League, and he talked about how excited he was to get this process going. And guys like Markelle Fultz told me he's really just been enjoying that process of just growing. I think when you look at the bigger teams or the more higher tier teams, you look at them and you're like, they're cute, but they've been playing some competitive basketball. Yeah. And then, I also look at the Chicago Bulls. Without Zach LaVine, who, many believe will finally get his wish of potentially going elsewhere, a success story in Chicago. Number one, they are in that play-in tournament circumference. And I go back to an interview that I had with Kobe White, who's been playing phenomenal basketball. The other night, he did miss his first game of the season against the Los Angeles Clippers, but I go back to something he said to me when we sat down over the summer. I know people were yelling at me about being on my phone, but this is significant for this reason. He talked about his goals for this season. And the one thing that stood out to me in that conversation was, and quote, I really just want to polish my overall game and continue to get better in that. And the thing that really stood out to me a year later in that conversation was simply this. He talked about losing to the Miami Heat, who ultimately became the Eastern Conference champions. Yep. And he talked about that experience, and he said, in quote, it was a good experience for us to experience that single elimination game. Not something you really experience in the NBA, but it was good for us. We beat a good Toronto team that lost to Miami, and they wound up going to the finals. We don't look at it as like that would have been us, but we look at it as it was right there.
Okay.
I like that. A year later, confidence. Yep. Guys have been down. You've had to kind of restructure in some processes, but here they are again, trying to knock on the play-in door. Will that experience last season delve into this season? And will they kind of get out of that and kind of go a little further? Time will tell.
Well, that's something that, to definitely keep an eye on, just the confidence. Teams that are playing lights-out basketball at this point. The team we're about to talk about, the Knicks, I don't know if they're playing lights-out basketball right now, especially after, kind of being beat up with injuries and all. The 39-27, fourth in the East, 32 games left in the season. When you talk to your sources, when you and Tim Thomas on the show, which we're going to talk about later, when you talk to people around the NBA, what's the consensus about the Knicks? Are they going to be contenders when it counts?
Well, I think the good thing about this team is the fact that their chemistry has been sky high. Okay. In my travels in Philadelphia, when they played the Knicks in the Wells Fargo Center, I talked to some of the guys who were brought in Bojan Bogdanovic as well as Alec Burks. Alec Burks fits like a glove, having been in New York before and understanding the process there. But To me, the biggest factor was how they adjusted when both Jalen Brunson and or Julius Randle has been out, and even OG Anunoby. I really think that from top to bottom, the trade benefited them. But more than anything else, I think the thing that really stands out is the fact that DNA of competitiveness, even in losses, was still there.
Yeah.
I look at McBride and how he filled in against the Atlanta Hawks, I believe, recently in the game when Jalen was out. Yep. You look at just the overall ability to still be durable. To me, that's what makes a competitive team, a championship team, and across the board, talking on the inside of what the Knicks are talking about, they're happy. The chemistry is there. On the outside, from many other people that I speak with, I think they were a little late to the party. I know last time we talked, you asked me if I thought that this would continue and or that Jalen Brunson was having an MVP season, yep, despite the time out off. I think that the Knicks have still been competitive, and I think that the Knicks, with a Julius Randle that is semi-healthy, can compete with the Milwaukee's and the Boston Celtics.
Before we even go deeper on Julius Randle, we're talking about durability. OG Anunoby has been one guy since that trade has come in, played lights out, balled out for this team. When he got hurt, you saw what he really meant to this team because they kind of slid. He kind of tweaked, I want to say, that right elbow, and in Thursday night's game against Portland, he was able to play. I think he scored 14 points. If he can't go, or if this is something that lingers on, can they win without OG Anunoby? And if you're Tibbs, how do you balance his minutes trying to get him ready for a playoff run, knowing that one injury, he can get re-injured, and that could set you back again?
Well, I think OG definitely propelled that team to a level of excitement.
Yeah.
But I think what you saw before OG was also exciting. Again, both could be true. It's one of those things there.
For sure.
And I think that's where the Dante DiVincenzo comes in, and if you're a fantasy owner in basketball, you saw how his points accrued definitely benefited your fantasy team. But for a playoff run, you're going to need a healthy OG Anunoby. You're going to need all hands on deck in that regard, from my estimations and from my vantage point. But again, I think when you have guys that are down and you guys have guys on the team who can fill in those moments where your big pups or big dogs are out, I think you've seen at points where guys competed. And it's interesting because even in those losses, you find ways to get better. You're not going to win every game, but you can go back to the tape and figure out where you can make those adjustments. And I think that's significantly what I think your stars being out does for your role players.
So, but are you worried about, because this big dog, when he comes back, Julius Randle, whoever's filling in for him may not get the minutes that they're seeing now once playoff time hits? Are you worried that since a Julius Randle hasn't played with OG Anunoby yet, hasn't played that much with Dante DiVincenzo, are you worried that that chemistry may not be there come crunch time, playoff time?
Well, you had a respectable career in football, so when I'm sure you can attest to when your star is out, you rally together and you figure it out. Do I say that they're going to the championship without a Julius or without a Jalen? I'm not sure that I can say that. But I think in the meantime, you figure it out. If I can make a kind of a parallel to that, it's kind of, you look at Philadelphia, where Joel Embiid Philly has not had much noise since the end of January when Joel scored 70 points.
Absolutely.
You make a trade, you bring in Buddy Hield, you bring in Kyle Lowry, and then you have other guys like DeAnthony Melton and Kelly Oubre that benefit that team. They've struggled, but I also think in those losses, you build chemistry outside of the court, whether it's card games, whether it's discussing things on the team playing. But once the big dog comes together, I think Philadelphia will be beneficial or will be benefited by Embiid coming in and helping the team. I think comparatively, but a little differently, you look at the Knicks the same way. I always looked at both Embiid as well as Randle's injury as either coming back right before the end of the season or the start of the playoffs. I think that's where the similarities align. The only difference is the Knicks have still done well while Randle and or Brunson have been out. I think when you have a team that depends so much on one player, like Philly with Embiid, you struggle. I think that the Knicks comparatively have so many other guys. You talked about the big man position. Hardenstein has filled in at certain times. You switched in on 10-day contracts, Taj Gibson in and out. I mean, my man is in Detroit right now playing because he's hoping to get a roster spot, and I think the Knicks will try to find a way to bring him back. So there's a lot of factors there, but ultimately you need your big guys to come in and produce. Big man, guard, etc., to be successful.
Well, this dude I'm about to talk about now is not a big man, but he's been exciting to watch since he came out of Kentucky. Hasn't been in the league since playing with the Clippers back in 2020, last season, I believe.
For the Clippers.
A couple days ago, John Wall on a podcast said that he's open to playing for the Heat. You think that's just podcast talk, or could there be something there? And could he help the Heat if he did head down to the 305?
Well, it's interesting. With John Wall in Los Angeles, it was really about rotation and fit. You look at last season under Ty Lue in Los Angeles, it didn't work out. They ended up ultimately getting Russell Westbrook, who really fit the mold that they envisioned John Wall playing in. However, the thing that I can say about John Wall and I have spoken throughout the course of the season, and in one of our exchanges via text, I asked him to clarify some stuff that he said about the Phoenix Suns, where someone asked him about playing alongside Bradley Beal, and he said to me, I spoke on our friendship. He said, I just want a job, that's all. I still love to hoop, that's all. And the one thing I can say about John Wall and knowing him and being around him throughout the course of his career, when the ball is put in his hand and whether he's got to adjust to play alongside other superstars, I think he can do it. I can say to you that during the season last year, before he signed with the Clippers, both the Heat as well as the Boston Celtics, and they were two of the teams that were interested in bringing him in. I know he's been working out feverishly, and I know that he wants to play. I do think he would help them. But I think the interesting thing about that whole process is I think bringing in Terry Rozier would potentially cut down on some of his minutes at point guard position.
That makes sense.
I'd like to see him play in Miami, and I think he would fit, particularly because he's been in shape, he's been making things happen, and he's consistent when put in the right position.
Yeah, it's not just like any old body coming off the street and plugging, playing, and putting in the minutes. A dude who's had success in the NBA, success throughout his career. So that could be another addition for the Heat, especially when we're talking about how the Boston Celtics just completely own the East right now. So if you had to pick right now, who's coming out of the East and who are some of your other favorites that we should be kind of keeping an eye on to do our due diligence on with 31, 32 games left in the regular season?
Well, Boston definitely has been playing good basketball. I think the thing that makes them stand out amongst some of their other peers, for the exception of Milwaukee, is their presence in the NBA Finals within the last 3 years. But I think they've been battle-tested. They've gone through some rearrangements of things. I like Porzingis, a healthy Porzingis. I think in the grand scheme of things, he was a better addition with Robert Williams ultimately missing the rest of this season. But I think ultimately, I think it's going to come down to Boston. I think it's going to come down to Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee is figuring a lot of things out. I sat down with Vin Baker, who's an assistant coach with the Bucks, and he compared Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo to the modern-day Kobe and Shaq. That's big shoes to fill.
Okay, yeah, it is.
But I think the other team that people don't talk much about, honestly, is the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have played pretty impressive basketball without their leader, Donovan Mitchell, being out. So I know the easy answer is to say that it's early. I think the Knicks are also in the conversation, but it all comes down to seeding. It all comes down to who's healthy at the end. I can't call it right now. I feel like this is a presidential election a little early. Too close to call.
And we're not even going to go there when it comes to that. Would you say, so could Joe Mazzulla kind of be on the hot seat in that sense, where I understand when people say a hot seat, what do you mean, the number one in the East? They didn't go to the finals last year. If he doesn't take this team to the finals this year, could he be replaced?
That's an interesting question. I think specifically because of the debacle with Ime Udoka and because Mazzulla was the favorite of many going in, I think that people are going to look at it like, hey, where's the cream filling? You know what I mean?
Yep.
The thing that's interesting about your question, though, is as I'm thinking about it, and I know it's a yes or no question, how favorited and how much of a rapport he has with that Celtics organization. I sat down with the owner, the majority owner of the team, and he talked about how he doesn't really have too much interaction prior to this to assistant coaches. He was playing in pickup games with the ownership group, with Grosbeck, the owner of the Celtics, the majority owner, and more. So I think it's going to be very hard for them to part ways right off the bat. I think they'll be watching, and hopefully they get it done so that is not a conversation we have this offseason.
All right. You announced a new show with Tim Thomas.
Yes.
Tell the viewers how they can find you guys and
no nonsense.
Plug it.
No nonsense with Tim Thomas and Scoop B. We dropped the first episode today. Special guest was Stephon Marbury, former Knick, New York Zone. You can check it out on all streaming platforms. Former Knick, he played for a lot of teams, but 13-year NBA vet Tim Thomas and I, we dropped a new show called No Nonsense with Tim Thomas and Scoop B. It's available wherever podcasts are offered, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well as YouTube at No Nonsense on TV.
Hey, No Nonsense. Go check it out. And as always, we'll cut the check next time, but you're definitely invited back again.
I love being invited to the cookout, brother. Thank you for the opportunity to be myself.
No problem.
Yes, sir.